1943. The war in Europe slowly begins to tilt against the Axis. In Rome, the fascist regime is faltering. On July 25th, in a day that would mark a turning point in Italian history, Benito Mussolini is dismissed by order of King Victor Emmanuel III. The Duce, symbol of the alliance with the Nazis, is arrested. The new leadership in Italy changes course and starts negotiating with the Allies. The news hits Adolf Hitler's headquarters like a bombshell. For the Führer, betrayal is intolerable, and the response will be swift and brutal. The Wehrmacht, meaning Germany's unified armed forces, will cross the Alps, not as a partner, but as an occupier. But how did the German invasion come about? What were the reasons behind that decision? And how did Italy end up divided between two governments, two armies, and two parallel wars? Join us to discover the answers to all these questions in this new documentary from military history. By mid-1943, Italy was a worn-out country. Defeats in North Africa, the disaster in Greece, and the bloody campaign in the Soviet Union had drained the Italian army, but even more so its people. Allied bombing raids on Rome and other cities had shattered national morale. Fascism's promise of glory had turned into hunger, ruins, and despair. On July 25th, after an internal vote of the Fascist Grand Council and with the backing of King Victor Emmanuel III, Benito Mussolini was removed from power and arrested. It was the end of his regime, or so it seemed. While talk in Italy centered on an armistice and peace, in Berlin there was only talk of betrayal. For Hitler, the fall of the Duce did not just mean losing a symbolic ally, but the real threat that the Allies could use Italian territory as a direct bridge into the heart of the Third Reich. The map was clear. If Italy surrendered, a corridor from Sicily to the Alps would open. The gates to southern Germany would be exposed. But beyond geography, there was a truth the Führer would not forget. The Italians had been a more problematic partner than a useful one. It was Germany that had to rescue Italian troops in Greece, that sustained the front in Africa, and that paid the price of the Duce's military adventures. To Hitler, they had been a burden, and now a threat. The decision was quick and left no room for diplomacy. The Nazis had to occupy Italy before the Allies did. It would be neither an act of assistance nor a gesture of camaraderie. It would be a total military occupation with precise strategic objectives. The Axis, as it had been conceived, was dead. What came next would be a divided, occupied Italy at war with itself. On September 8, 1943, over the radio, Marshal Pietro Badoglio, appointed prime minister after Mussolini's fall, announced to the world news that shook the course of the war. The Italian government had requested and obtained an armistice with the Allies. The message was clear. Italy was changing sides. After 3 years of alliance with the Third Reich, the new regime sought to save what was left of the country, even if that meant surrender. But for Adolf Hitler, that announcement was no surprise. He had been anticipating it for weeks. Since late July, the Führer suspected Mussolini's dismissal hid more than an internal reshuffle. Intelligence reports, wiretaps, and even strategic intuition pointed to Rome preparing its surrender. The German leader, obsessed with not repeating the mistake of trusting a weak ally, had already activated Operation Axa, the plan to occupy Italy and disarm its forces before they could join the Allies. The operation began almost in parallel with Badoglio's announcement. On September 9, 1943, while Allied troops were landing at Salerno, more than 20 German divisions advanced across the country, seizing ports, railroads, and key positions. Around 400,000 soldiers advanced and faced little real resistance from disoriented Italian forces lacking clear orders. In some cases, they were peacefully disarmed. In others, they were outright massacred. It was a lightning occupation, but meticulously planned. Hitler had a double goal: control Italy to halt the Allied advance and punish betrayal.
Qui c'era una vecchia canapiera e oltre 40 persone furono fucilate, furono uccise qui dentro, massacrate, i loro corpi, furono aperte le paratie di una grande vasca in cui i corpi erano caduti, finirono lungo il Reno da quella canaletta e i loro corpi non furono più recuperati. Soltanto uno fu riconosciuto.
While these atrocities unfolded alongside the Nazi advance, an elite SS commando led by Otto Skorzeny carried out one of the war's boldest missions. On September 12th, after weeks of tracking, they located Mussolini imprisoned at Gran Sasso, a remote alpine station guarded by Italian soldiers. In an almost cinematic assault, German gliders landed beside the site, rescued the Duce without firing a shot, and immediately transferred him to Germany. Days later, under direct order from Hitler, Benito Mussolini returned to Italy, but no longer as an independent leader. He was now Berlin's puppet. In the city of Salo, the Italian Social Republic was proclaimed a fascist puppet regime propped up by Nazi bayonets. Italy was broken. In the south, Badoglio's government, supported by the Allies, tried to rebuild a legitimate state. In the center and north, German forces kept a tight grip, crushing any sign of insurrection. The country that once dreamed of reviving the glory of the Roman Empire had become a battlefield between two worlds. What followed was not just a war against foreign invaders, it was a civil war. Italians against Italians, fascists against partisans, brothers facing each other in a land torn apart by their leaders' decisions.
Light closes down on the Italian front, and Allied guns stab at the Nazi. French troops under a Yank smoke screen. And tanks move forward, driving on the Gustav line.
The Allies, who had already set foot in the south of the peninsula with the successful invasion of Sicily, advanced on Italian soil. Yet soon, they encountered their first major obstacle: the Gustav Line. There, they did not face a defeated army, but the German war machine entrenched in full defense. The Wehrmacht established a series of fortified lines stretching across Italy from coast to coast, using the mountains as natural shields. It was ideal terrain to slow any advance. A new and grueling military campaign was beginning. The enemy of the Allied troops was no longer a collapsing regime, but one determined to resist to the last man. The Nazi network of fortifications was imposing. Trenches and artillery positions stretched along the narrowest point of the peninsula, between the Tyrrhenian Sea and the Adriatic. At the center of that wall, like a knot that could not be untied, stood Monte Cassino. This mountain massif was not only strategic, it also housed a 6th century Benedictine abbey, one of the oldest temples in Europe. But its symbolic value would not prevent it from becoming the epicenter of one of the war's bloodiest battles. From January to May 1944, the Allies launched 4 massive offensives to break the Gustav Line. The terrain worked against them: steep mountains, harsh weather, swollen rivers, and a disciplined, expert German defense. Divisions of Americans, Britons, French, and New Zealanders fought fiercely for every meter of ground. The Monte Cassino monastery was bombed into rubble. Thousands died, and still the line held.
Hordes of German prisoners are taken as the enemy stronghold surrenders. Strain and weariness mark the features of these battered captives. victims of the Allied drive on Rome. At the foot of the mountain, the gutted buildings of the town offer grim testimony to the fury of the battle that raged for months.
Meanwhile, in an attempt to hasten Rome's fall, on January 22, 1944, the Allies launched a bold operation, the landing at Anzio, behind German lines. The idea was simple: flank the Gustav line and cut the enemy's supply routes. But what was meant to be a lightning strike turned into a quagmire. Troops landed but did not advance. Ordered to dig in, they became trapped in a narrow beachhead, surrounded by German forces. For months, Anzio was a hell of artillery, mud, and blood. Only in May, after fierce fighting in Cassino and a new offensive combined with the Anzio forces, did the Allies manage to break the Gustav line. German defenses, finally overcome by pressure and attrition, began to give way. The road to Rome, though still dangerous, was open.
Bombed out Italian townsfolk. Some of them withstood terrific barrages, hiding deep in the ruins. But the tide of battle rolls on as Martin marauders attack communications behind the German line. The road to Rome is open.
On June 4th, 1944, after nearly a year of fighting since the landing in Sicily, Allied troops entered the Italian capital. As they marched through the streets, they were cheered by a crowd worn out by war. It was a symbolic triumph, the first Axis capital to fall into enemy hands. But the war in Italy was far from over. While Allied flags waved over the Tiber, in the north, the Republic of Salo still stood, upheld by German troops and Mussolini's last loyal fascists. And the worst was yet to come. The Nazis, led by veteran Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, had no intention of giving up the peninsula. In the Apennine region north of Rome, they designed the Gothic line, a formidable chain of fortifications, bunkers, machine gun nests, and minefields stretching coast to coast. It was their last great defense, their bastion in southern Europe.
La Gotica era una linea fortificata che i tedeschi avevano cominciato a costruire fin dall'autunno del 1943 utilizzando operai italiani e prigionieri di guerra. Lungo tutto il suo arco erano disseminati 500 cannoni, 3.000 nidi di mitragliatrice, 4.000 fortini, 100.000 mine, 16.000 postazioni di cecchini, innumerevoli fossati anticarro e chilometri di reticolati.
The terrain was merciless. The mountains, covered in fog, rain, or snow depending on the season, offered defenders a natural advantage. There, epic and almost forgotten battles were fought, such as at the Futa and Giogo passes, where the Allies faced one of the fiercest defenses of the conflict. One of the unsung protagonists of this stage was the U.S. 91st Infantry Division, which bore the brunt of combat in the mountain passes. Its soldiers, often inexperienced youngsters, advanced under enemy fire, through minefields, barbed wire, improvised explosives, and camouflaged positions on the slopes. Every meter gained cost, sweat, mud, and blood.
Due formidabili schieramenti di uomini e di mezzi contrapposti lungo la linea gotica.
By then, the Italian front was no longer the sole affair of regular armies. In the occupied north, the Italian partisan resistance fought its own war against Nazi occupiers and the fascists of Salo. Sabotage, ambushes, rescues, even open battles in towns and cities. It was a desperate and brave struggle, giving a civilian face to a military conflict. The outlook grew increasingly complex for the Germans, but the Führer ordered them to fight to the death to defend territory occupied by the Third Reich.
Hitler pretendeva la difesa a oltranza della linea gotica per impedire l'apertura di un altro fronte nei Balcani e per consentire alla Germania lo sfruttamento delle energie industriali e agricole dell'Italia del Nord. Il primo ministro inglese Winston Churchill, da parte sua, chiedeva invece lo sfondamento a tutti i costi della linea gotica per consentire alle armate alleate di dirigersi verso Vienna e verso Lubiana e arrivarci prima dei russi.
On the Allied side, concern was not only about defeating Germany. Figures like Churchill felt threatened by Europe's future structure. He feared a colossal expansion of Soviet influence across the continent. In April 1945, all fears dissipated. The Reich was collapsing on all fronts, and the final encirclement over Italy closed in. Allied troops, Italian partisans, and Polish units joined forces in a total offensive. Cities like Bologna, Parma, Verona, and Milan were liberated one after another in a chain of victories that now seemed inevitable. On May 2, 1945, German forces in Italy surrendered unconditionally. And although the Italian campaign did not lead to a direct invasion of German territory, its strategic impact was profound. It forced Hitler to divert vital resources from the Eastern Front and from Normandy, weakening his capacity to respond at critical moments. It also precipitated the downfall of Mussolini's fascist regime, plunging Italy into a civil war that divided the country, but also paved the way toward a future democratic republic. The opening of a new front in southern Europe contributed to the gradual attrition of the Axis. And though often forgotten, the Italian campaign was a key piece in the collapse of the Third Reich. And so, we reach the end. We await you in our next episode to continue uncovering everything about military history.